Hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Eric Emery. I've been a professional mixer for the last 10 years. I have a studio in North Hollywood, and I've found myself lately getting a lot of the same questions from interns and assistants and just people generally coming through the studio. And it's made me realize that I have sort of a wealth of knowledge that I've accumulated that I would like to share with everyone. So I would like to kick off the first video talking about compression a bit. I know it's a sort of a deep, elaborate concept, but I'd like to start with a more macro approach, how I would approach selecting the right compressor for my drum bus, and maybe start with some of the classic compressors that everyone might know, and we can kind of go through the different sounds, and then I'll elaborate further on some upcoming videos. Cool, so first things first here, I have my template pulled up. This was a mix I was working on, so that's why there's a lot of extra stuff on here, because this is my initial template and I have a lot of stuff turned off just for the sake of the video. But I basically have 4 of the most classic compressors that anyone would reach for. I would say that these are main compressors you should learn about when you're learning about compressors. It's one of every kind. There's a very Muse style, there's the FET compressor, then I have an Opto, and then I sort of have the VCA solid state classic SSL compressor. So these are 4 compressors that are commonly used on drums. I just kind of wanted to start with these. So let's just start off. Here are the raw drums, essentially. I mean, they're a little mixed, but these are the raw drums off the microphones for the most part with some EQ, and there's general individual channel compression as well. And now you can tell through automation and through some individual compression that the performance is nice and even. So I'm mostly going to use these compressors to try and get some sort of color and saturation and vibe. So what I'm going to start with is the 1176, and I want you to kind of listen to what it does. The best thing to do with compressors on drums is you want to start with the slowest attack and the fastest release as a general starting point, and then adjust from there. But you kind of can't go wrong with those settings. The one thing to note on the 1176 is the controls are backwards. The left side on the attack is actually the slowest, and when you go right on release, this will be the fastest. I like to start with a 4-to-1 ratio just to kind of get started and then adjust from there, but I'll probably stick with 4-to-1. So let's start with the 1176 and see what that does to the sound. So here's without. When you're auditioning compressors too, you're going to kind of want to level match as best as you can. So maybe it got a little louder, so don't be fooled with the loudness. So one thing about an 1176, I would describe it as there's like a spitty texture to it. Sometimes that's desirable, sometimes it's not. But it's bringing the hi-hat, a lot of the upper mids more forward, particularly a characteristic with this bluey. There's also the Blackie option. This is just the Waves CLA 76. The Bluey is a little bit more mid-forward and a little bit more aggressive. So one more time, I'll show you. Definitely getting more of a bite in the upper mid-range. So now let's go to the SSL compressor. This is a classic compressor used on drums and mix bus all the time. So let's just start with this and I'll show you what it does. Now the first thing you might notice with that compressor is you actually lose a bit of the low end. That's kind of a staple of the SSLs. So a lot of times people will compensate after the fact with some EQ. But what it's doing actually, which is kind of counterintuitive, is it's making it sound punchier by taking away some of the sub-lows. So it's kind of taking away sub-lows and enhancing the punch in a nice way. That's why this is a pretty common compressor for drums. It also is giving sort of an upper mid-range bump too. A lot of these compressors, that's one of the biggest things you'll notice is sort of what it does to the upper mid-range. So I like this one a little more than the 1176 for this particular part. It's a little less spitty and it sounds more controlled and a little more gluey. That's a common word you'll hear with compressors a lot, but it's kind of just, it basically, I mean, through the use of compression, it's kind of rounding things out and it's just sort of making everything live in a similar nice space. That's what the SSL is kind of known for. Now it does have the auto release on here on this SSL, so we'll go to that and you'll hear the difference. It's a little less punchy because it's not as fast, but it's adapting to the signal in real time essentially. You'll hear when I switch, the kick drum really comes more forward with the super fast release. So you can take your pick from that. For me, I'd probably start with the fast one here, and then I'd go from there. The thing, though, to notice, too, is this attack. I start with the slowest attack, but you can kind of control the pumping and the kick drum with the attack. So if I start to speed up the attack, it'll kind of pull back the kick drum a bit. Obviously, you should compensate your threshold here because you'll get a little more compression. But aside from the pumpiness, you'll notice what it's doing to the kick drum. It's kind of tucking in the kick drum nicely. So sometimes I'll use this setting if it's like a fast kick drum, like a metal song or something, and I kind of contain the kick drum a bit more. But for general parts, I usually stick to the slowest attack. So that's the SSL. Now another one here, I have the CLA2A, which is an LA2A. This is a chrysalid algae version, essentially. This is a much slower sounding compressor, so for fast parts, I wouldn't recommend it, but it can definitely add a lot of warmth on a nice sort of ballady section. But let's hear what it does with this part. That's nice. It's definitely adding a vibe. It's having a hard time keeping up with the kick drum, it sounds like. So you're getting a little more bottom end, it almost sounds like, and a little less transient. So it's probably just the lack of transient making it sound warmer. So that's another thing to note. A lot of times you have to ask yourself, like, am I getting more low end or am I just getting less top end, which is making it feel like there's more low end. So in this instance, I think we're losing some transient because of the slowness of this CLA2A, and it's making it actually feel a bit warmer. So if that's a desired effect, you can go with that one. And then this on top here is a really awesome compressor. This is a cool plugin. It's based on the Altex from the 50s or 60s or whatever. It's a very Muse style. So the way these work is interesting. The more input you have, like the harder you hit it, the more compression is happening. So you don't really get fixed ratio. It's kind of just, it's always moving. I think gain, or mu, I think stands for gain. So it's variable gain, essentially. You hear as soon as I slowed the attack down, the transients popped through. This one's doing a lot. It's really bringing out sort of the room sound and everything. It's creating a really nice effect. I would probably go with this one. For what it's worth, I'm used to working with a lot of analog gear, and I feel like this plugin in particular is the closest to the sound I'm used to with the analog gear. It just kind of has this really nice sort of gluey warmth that it gives, and I just love this plugin. It's one of my favorites. I use it all the time. So that's definitely, those are some of the classic compressors. I will say another thing, though, too. As you can hear, I'm putting these all on my drum bus specifically. A lot of times I won't do that. A lot of times I'll do things in parallel. So I actually have this drum parallel pulled up so we can kind of hear the difference. But for those who don't know, parallel compression essentially is, instead of impacting the direct signal, you're duplicating the signal or putting it on a send and then compressing that and blending it with the original. So you have full control over the mixture of compressed versus non-compressed. Parallel compression is cool because you get the benefits of compression without losing sort of the organic vibe of the original source material, which sometimes, if you have a picky client, that'll lose you the client if you change their vibe and all the stuff they loved about the demo. So this is a good way to counteract that and still get what you want from the compressor. So I'll mute all of these, bypass all of these, and I will blend in, and once again, this is my template, so ignore most of this stuff. I just have this drums parallel. Normally a Fairchild, so It says drums Fairchild. That's with nothing happening. Now, put a little bit of this in there. Match the gains here. So you're hearing now the compressing will blend it in with the main drum signal. Now if I just want to show you what is happening with the compressor, this is just the compressed version. And with parallel, you can get away with a little more compression. I know some guys smash their parallels. I don't like to do that, but it does give you the freedom to be a little bit more eccentric with your compression approach. You can see I'm even clipping. Do I care? Not really. But I'll pull that down anyway. If it sounds cool, it sounds cool. So that's them together. That's the SSL that I like. Now let's go to this. This might be a good time to use the CLA 76 because it's an aggressive compressor, but blended in, it might be perfect. That's really nice. That's slamming hard. That's really cool. And then let's grab this one. So this might be really cool too, because now you can get the warmth from this CLA 2A without losing the transients. So this is probably the best example of when parallel compression should be used. And now, because we're in parallel, we can crank this a bit more. Yeah, it loses all that bottom and impact. Put it right back. Kind of a night and day difference, really. And now, one of my faves. Let's go to this AR1, which is the Altec. Also, another thing I want to bring up, I send, and you can see this here in the video, I send my whole drum bus to the parallel drums. A lot of people will put it on individual tracks, but I find that starts to get a little phasey. So I would just want to send my entire kit at the same time. I don't like to put sends from like the toms and the snare and the kick separately and blend that. I know some guys will do that. The worst case is you'll get a little more cymbal, but I think you can adjust that in the main mix. I kind of have them both on from the start of the mix, so then my cymbal balance is sort of impacted by them all playing at the same time anyway, so it's not really a big deal, but I just wanted to point that out, because you will run into phase issues quickly by doing these sort of parallel things. You know, even with delay compensation, it's still not perfect, so I like to sort of minimize the potential issues with that. So yeah, I send my entire drum bus to the drum parallel, and you can have a few, but let's do the AR1 again here. So you can hear the cymbals get a little loud there because they're going here, but I would just do this. So yeah, that's a quick run through of some of the classic compressors I like to use on drums and on a lot of other things, but drums is a really good place to start. It's one of the more important parts of a mix. It's where I start a mix, so I figured I'd run you through those compressors on drums, and you can apply some of this in your own mix templates and see how you like it.